things. So I'm back with another movie video, and this time it's about horror anthologies. So anthologies are a really good way to showcase short horror stories, but uniting several of them into one feature-length film, usually upon a specific theme. Some of these are better than others. Some of these I haven't seen, but there's quite a few. Anyway, the first one on here from 2015 is Southbound. I watched this one through Shudder. I really appreciated that even though it was 5 different directors and 5 different stories, they all were interlocking. And so even though there's a subtle difference in each story and each storytelling, it does all make one cohesive film by the end of it. It was not perfect, but it was definitely a really cool idea. Would definitely revisit. Double X or XX from 2017, which is some stories by all women directors, was one of those that I like the idea of, and the execution really left something to be desired. It's not a bad watch, but it's not a good watch either. VHS from 2012, VHS 2 from 2013, and VHS Viral from 2014 definitely were made very popular on Netflix when I was in college. And I liked the first one despite not being a big found footage fan. I thought the first one was pretty good. The second one had one particular segment that was genuinely unnerving, which was, I think it was called Safe Haven, the cult one, because cults do kind of creep me out. And then I didn't see Viral because I kept hearing how bad it was, and I just had lost interest in the series by that point, so I haven't seen Viral, but oh well. Holidays from 2016 has several different directors that do short films based off of a holiday all throughout the year. This one was very, very fun. I think I saw this one through Shudder as well, and I got a kick out of it. Definitely some of them were better than others, and some of them had moments of, what? I think the Easter one was the one that messed me up the most, or I don't know. That was the one that I was like, what in the hell? I did get a kick out of the fact that the Halloween one was directed by Kevin Smith and did star his daughter and her best friend Lily Rose Depp, so I thought that was quite entertaining. Tales of Halloween from 2015. This one I really wanted to like more. I never got rid of my DVD because it's from Australia, and so I can't. But it's definitely very fun. I believe it is on Amazon Prime and on Shudder, and it might be on Netflix too. But I can't always remember what streaming services stuff is on. But this one was a bunch of different events that all took place on the same night, all around this one town. The unifying factor is Adrian Barbeau being a radio jockey, and then the main continuity tie is Night of the Living Dead being on the TV. There's some of the stories in here that are genuinely fun, and some of them where I'm like, well, that was stupid. But on the whole, it's definitely pretty watchable. I do like watching it usually on or around Halloween because I do get a kick out of it. Ghost Stories from 2017, I don't believe I've seen. It's one of those, like, I might have seen it and forgotten because I watch enough films that sometimes I can't remember everything I've seen. Generally, my film volume goes from anywhere between 1 to 9 movies a day, so it makes it a little hard to keep track. Hence why I do so many videos on movies. ABCs of Death from 2012 I thought was very much worthwhile. It was a really cool exploration because all of the films are very short and they have to base their concept off of a letter of the alphabet, and I thought the idea was really cool. ABCs of Death 2 I thought was slightly better in some of the segments and slightly worse in others. The last segment in ABCs of Death 2 kind of messed me up a little bit. I was like, oh no. It was too much. It was really wild, but I appreciated how far out there it was. Nightmare Cinema from 2018, which is one of the most recent ones on this list. I know I saw this one on Shudder, and I did think it was pretty good, but it was also a little bit generic. There was nothing in it that I thought was especially striking, so I don't really remember individual segments. A Christmas Horror Story from 2015 was just really bad. I can't even remember why I was interested in watching this. I didn't really think it was worth my time. It's one of those movies that for some people it could be construed as so bad it's good. For me, it was just a little too boring in order to qualify into that category as someone who does watch a lot of really bad movies. The Theater Bazaar from 2011, I do really have an appreciation for, and I'm a little surprised I don't have on DVD. I think this one is on Shudder, but when I initially saw it, it was on Netflix when it was new. The first segment in it, The Mother of Toads by Richard Stanley, which is based off of a Clark Ashton Smith story, is the best part of the whole film. The wraparound story is successfully pretty creepy, and I do really like Udo Kier, so I'm a little biased. That one's a lot of fun. It's a little strange, and I do think that first segment is worth the whole film. I thought it was really cool. Chillerama is kind of a rough one because I always forget that this has the kind of like really gross, inappropriate, stupid humor of like a teenage boy. I'm not really the intended audience for this, probably, and I've seen it probably 4 times, and it's still just too much every time I watch it. But if you're into that kind of thing where it's definitely more gross out comedy than horror, but with horror elements, you might as well give this one a shot, because there's a lot of moments of, oh no. The Field Guide to Evil from 2018, which I saw through Hulu, I believe, was actually pretty cool, and they have some good folk horror elements pretty heavily in it. Most of the short films in it are European, and so most of it is not in English, and I did think that some of it was really cool. One of the segments is from the director of I want to say it's 2016, murderous Little Mermaid musical set in 1980s Poland film The Lure, which I'll talk about some other time. But it was definitely a worthwhile anthology. I did really appreciate it. And then probably the one that for a lot of people has become a giant cult hit and very popular amongst a lot of people is Trick or Treat. This one's slightly less of an anthology film in the sense that all of the segments are from the same director, and it's a little bit more akin to anthology like Pulp Fiction is, which is to say it's different sequences of events over the course of the same night in the same town that all do tie together. It's just taken out of order. This was one that I stumbled across probably when it first was released. And it came out in 2007, but wasn't actually released to the public until late 2009, early 2010, something like that. I don't know. When it first hit Netflix, my friend and I stumbled across it right then, and we were both just totally surprised by how good it was. Admittedly, it's been a little bit oversaturated for me, and so I don't love it the way that I used to, but it is still a really good anthology. It has a very strong comic kind of feel to it. I really like the style and the storytelling in it. The most attractive I've ever found Anna Paquin is the one she was a werewolf, but this is definitely a fun one, and I do really appreciate it. Trapped Ashes from 2006 I haven't seen and know nothing about, so I can't really verify if that one's good. Asylum from 1972 I know I've seen and honestly can't remember anything about it. I think it was rather slow and dull. So I really can't verify if it was good or not. Creepshow 1 and 2. The first Creepshow is a classic. It's kind of a must-see. My favorite segment is The Crate, but I do end up watching this film on Father's Day, usually if I can, because of the first segment. The comic wraparound is very fun. I definitely get a kick out of this whole film. It's just very thoroughly enjoyable. The second one I like, but is not really my favorite. The Raft is probably the segment that sticks out the most to me. It's very simple and still works really well. So if you haven't seen either one of them, definitely watch the first one. Second one's negotiable. I haven't seen Creepshow 3, which is generally disowned by Creepshow fans because it's really bad. The recent TV show that was aired through Shudder, I did genuinely get a kick out of. The majority of the stories are not actually from the original Tales from the Crypt comics, but a bunch of other random things. And I did really like it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I did think that it was successfully comically weird. So it's certainly worth looking into if you like that kind of thing. Next one on here, The House That Dripped Blood from 1972. This one this one's fun, and it's really funny because there is no actual blood in the film. It's very English. It's very, is it from, oh my goodness, it's from Amicus. Okay, so Amicus is, to some people, it's a little bit like Hammer. It is in a similar vein. But it's, all of these tales are united by this one house that was supposedly cursed. It's not great. I did appreciate the vampiric segment with Ingrid Pitt quite a bit, but it is very fun, and it's also PG, so it's good for younger people if you really want to be that daring. Three Extremes. I really like this one. All three of the directors in here, Fruit-chan and Chan Wook-pak and Takashi Miike, are all very good. Admittedly, Fruit-chan is the only director I've ever seen from Hong Kong, but Park Chan-wook is my favorite South Korean director, and his segment I do very much like, I think probably the most, but Takashi Miike's segment is decidedly unsettling, and I did appreciate it quite a bit with this one very ominous box. But this one's definitely worth watching. It's a little bit long, but it's really good. So it's in, I believe, Mandarin and Korean and Japanese. Three Extremes 2, I haven't had the chance to watch yet, but I will get around to it. I mostly wanted to investigate it because of Kim Ji-yoon, because I like his films as well, even if I haven't seen all of them. Tales from the Darkside is really fun, and for a lot of people who like the Creepshow films, I kind of like to view this as like the secret third movie, even though none of the stories in here are based off of the Tales from the Crypt comics. I really do get a kick out of this one, and I really like that Debbie Harry is the witch that's going to eat the little boy in the wraparound story. All three of the segments in it I did find genuinely enjoyable, from taking revenge with a mummy on a bad classmate who keeps screwing you over, to a cat that's very evil, and to a monstrous love story. I did think this one was really good, and I appreciated it a whole lot. Tales from the Hood from 1995 is one where I was a little hesitant to watch it because I kept hearing so many bad reviews, and then when I actually did get around to watching it, I appreciated the social commentary and how much kind of effort and love was put into the film. It really isn't my thing specifically, but I did appreciate it a whole lot, and I do think that the storytelling was really good. Even though the wraparound story I thought was just a little bit too hokey for its own good. Because these kids bust into a mortuary, and then they're really eclectic mortician, funeral home director who works there, who is kind of an iconic presence in his own right. He was a little bit too much for me in a weird way. I don't know why or how, but From Beyond the Grave from 1974, I haven't seen, so I can't verify if that one's good or not. Scary or Die from 2012. I can't remember if I don't think I've seen this one. I think I've just seen the cover for it a lot, which I think features a very ugly clown. So I've kind of avoided it because it looks stupid. Torture Garden from 2006, I also haven't seen. Body Bags from 1993, I enjoy immensely and highly recommend. I believe it's on YouTube. I know it's on Amazon Prime, and I know it's on Shudder. And this one's a lot of fun because it has John Carpenter kind of playing this sickly morgue attendant. He is in some very crazy makeup. The segments are all wild. The most worthwhile part of it is the cameos and the eclecticity of the eclectic nature of the cast. It was initially pitched to HBO as a pilot for an anthology horror show that didn't get picked up, but as a film standalone on its own, I did think it worked pretty well. The segments individually aren't perfect, but I'm such a sucker for good cameos, so that one's totally worth it for that at the very least. Tales That Witness Madness from 1973, I haven't seen. Trilogy of Terror from 1975. Dan Curtis did a lot of kind of gothic, low-budget TV movies in the 70s, and this is one of the better ones with Karen Black. She is in all three of the segments, and the last segment featuring the little effigy doll that attacks her is probably the most iconic of the lot. I haven't seen Trilogy of Terror 2, but the first one's definitely worth looking into. I believe it was remade, but I can't remember, and I haven't seen it, so it's not on the list. Black Sabbath from Mario Bava from 1963 is kind of a must-watch for horror nerds. This is the film that the band got their name from. It's kind of an iconic piece of Italian Gothic cinema, and I appreciate that Boris Karloff is so highly billed in this, despite being in the film for very little time. But it's definitely well worth watching. I can't really recommend it enough. It's totally worthwhile. One of the segments in it is based off of a Tolstoy, I don't know if it's a short story or a novel, but that has also been adapted into several other films, including The Vampire Family from 1990. But that's definitely worth looking into. The Cat's Eye from 1985, or 1981, sorry. I don't remember very well. I know I've seen it, but I wasn't incredibly impressed by it. I'm admittedly not a gigantic Stephen King fan. I like his stuff well enough, but he's not my favorite. And I think one of the segments in this movie I always got mixed up with as one of the segments in Tales from the Darkside, so I don't know. It's not really my favorite. Kwaidan from 1964 is one of those Japanese ghost story films that you sort of have to watch. I feel remiss that I don't have a copy of it, but all the stories individually are very good, and I know there's a particular ghost story in it. I can't remember the name of that is especially striking, but it's a must watch. Tales of Terror with Vincent Price is very fun. It's based off of predominantly Morella, the Black Cat in the case of M. Vandermeer. And I do get a kick out of this one. It has that very particular Roger Corman kind of camp from when he was doing that cycle of films, including The Raven and Pit and the Pendulum, with Vincent Price, where they were doing a lot of Poe films in the 60s. So that one's worth it. Monster Club from 1981 is not great. I thought it was very, very fun, but it's not precisely a good film. It's mostly just really endearing to see the wraparound where it's in a club for monsters. I ended up totally falling in love with the soundtrack and realized it was very difficult to find on vinyl, which completely surprised me. I did end up with a copy of it through just serendipity, but one side of the soundtrack has these kind of like fun club music, and the other side is a John Williams score for the rest of the film. It's PG, it's very cute in its weird way, but I adore Vincent Price and John Carradine, and so that's the main reason it's worth it to me. It's not a perfect film, but it's very entertaining. The Uncanny from 1977, I watched for Peter Cushing and was disappointed in how utterly forgettable and uninteresting the stories were in it. He's kind of this frantic writer who's been collecting this research on uncanny happenstances, and so he's kind of in the main wraparound story. It's not phenomenal, but the Twilight Zone movie from 1983, kind of a must-watch for a lot of horror fans. Out of the Twilight Zone, I've seen the vast majority of the Rod Serling original black and white. I haven't seen the revivals from the 80s, the 2000s, or the more recent ones, but it's the Nightmare on 20,000 Feet, there's something on the wing. You can't really ever forget that. This film is also reportedly cursed due to the amount of deaths and weird happenstances during the filming of it. So it's worth watching for its notoriety alone. Also, because I always forget about it, is An Evening of Edgar Allan Poe, which is not quite one of the better Vincent Price Poe features. It's also only an hour. It was kind of like a TV spot, but it's mostly just, if you want to listen to Vincent Price, read The Sphinx, The Cask of Amontillado, and Pit and the Pendulum. I did really get a kick out of that one, even though it's quite short. Necronomicon from 1993, which is one of those movies that I spent entirely too long looking for before someone was nice enough to gift me this DVD, which is based off of the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Jeffrey Combs, who's known for his work in H.P. Lovecraft themes films, plays Lovecraft in the wraparound story as he goes to the library looking for the Necronomicon so that he can use it for his research for his stories. It's not a great film, but it is impressively and surprisingly grossly gory. And there is a type of creativity to it that I appreciate it. So, I mean, it's based off of a couple of classic Lovecraft stories such as Rats in the Walls, Whispers in the Dark, and Cold Air. But the creature effects makeup in it is decidedly unique, and I appreciate it. Deadtime stories from 1986 I thought was a riot. It's really fun. It's sort of in the same spirit as Creepshow, but still manages to be completely different, but it does have a kind of weird camp to it that I thought very enjoyable. Deadtime stories from, I want to say 2014, however, was not especially worthwhile, and you can totally skip over. Dead of Night was one that I almost forgot to add to this list because it's so much older than everything else on it, which is from 1945. And this actually is widely considered to be the start of the tradition of anthology horror films. And I believe this was also remade by Dan Curtis in the mid-70s, but I haven't seen that version of it. But the original 1945 one has one of the most iconic and upsetting ventriloquist dummies, because they have a long history of being upsetting in horror. A guy who does a bit of a time slip, but this is definitely a very worthwhile watch, especially if you like older films. Twice Told Tales is fun. These are based off of stories from Nathaniel Hawthorne, who I have never read, so I can't verify how accurate they are. But it definitely draws from Dr. Heidegger's experiments, Rappaccini's Daughter, and The House of Seven Gables. But again, Vincent Price is a giant draw. I will watch anything with Vincent Price in it. I'm totally biased. He was really great. But this also is quite a fun collection. And the last two on here are Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror, which are both different anthology films from 1972 and 1973 respectively. Tales from the Crypt was the first Scream adaptation of the original comics from EC from the early 50s. But I still think it's kind of funny just to think of the cast. I mean, Tom Baker, who is known as the Fourth Doctor, is in Vault of Horror, and Peter Cushing and Joan Collins were in Tales from the Crypt. I can't remember if I've seen Vault of Horror. I think I have. But the most striking thing about Tales from the Crypt is that they're all literally trapped in a crypt. It's this group of people that are trapped in a crypt and have these stories told to them, or they tell these stories to each other. But anyway, anthology films have a long-standing history in horror, and it's good if you want bite-sized horror but don't want to watch actual short films. Check some of these out. If there are others that you like that I've forgotten to mention, please don't hesitate to leave comments. Till next time, Darklings.